It's been interesting watching the press reaction to the State of the Union. I think there was desire, as there often is for Trump, to cast him in the mode of a normal president, to say things like, this gives him a chance to recover from the public, to do a reset, some of the usual cliches you see after or before and after a State of the Union. Now, I watched the entire thing, probably hazardous to my health, but I make sacrifices to cover American politics, and this is one of them. Watching a Donald Trump speech, 2 hours, it went just about, very long, very tedious, very uninteresting. Ultimately, he's never been all that capable of saying anything new. He repeats himself. He says the same things in the same mode. There's a remarkable constancy to Trump that some people find appealing and I find very boring.
Boring.
But that's theater criticism. What I want to talk about with regards to the presidency of the Union is how remarkable it was as an example of, I think, the most distinctive aspect of Trump's presence on the national stage in Trump's presidency. That distinctive aspect is just the extent to which Donald Trump makes no effort whatsoever to be president for the entire American people, for the entire American public. I talked about this in an earlier video, but up until 1913, the State of the Union was a note given to Congress, effectively an email. It wasn't a big pageant. It wasn't a spectacle where members of Congress are desperate to talk to the president, to meet the president, and so on and so forth. They had a little more dignity than that. And in any case, once presidents began going to Congress to deliver the State of the Union, it was an invitation. You're coming into the people's chamber. This isn't the case of a king going to see his subjects, but of an executive officer giving what is essentially a progress report for his administration. Now, there was none of that with Trump's State of the Union. His State of the Union was, in fact, quite regal. It was him bestowing awards and gifts on various people who came, less as equal citizens in the Republic and almost as something like supplicants, people who ought to be grateful to the president for his generosity. And Republicans in Congress behaved as sycophantically as one could imagine. Afterwards, desperately trying to get the president's attention, trying to get some memento of his presence. There was one Republican lawmaker, in fact, who asked Trump to sign his tie, which is a lack of dignity if I've ever seen one. But beyond the style of the proceedings lies the substance, and the substance was very much aimed at presenting a vision of America in which some Americans just don't belong. You had Trump leading Republicans and jeering their Democratic colleagues.
Nobody stands up. These people are crazy, I'm telling you. They're crazy.
You had Trump indulging in lurid racism against Somali Americans and other immigrant groups.
The Somali pirates who ransacked Minnesota remind us that there are large parts of the world where corruption and lawlessness are the norm, not the exception. Importing these cultures through unrestricted immigration and open borders brings those problems right here to the USA, and it is the American people who pay the price in higher medical bills, car insurance rates, rent, taxes, and perhaps most importantly, crime.
And you had Trump declaring in his advocacy for the SAVE Act that Democrats winning elections at all, which is to say Democrats voting, constitutes a form of fraud that needs to be stopped and prevented. In his view, by putting tight new restrictions on the ability to vote altogether. He called voting, in fact, a privilege that must be secured from the likes of people who think that they should be allowed to oppose the president and his party.
They want to cheat, they have cheated, and their policy is so bad that the only way they can get elected is to cheat. And we're going to stop it. We have to stop it, John.
All of that together, in addition to being strikingly authoritarian and demonstrating a real contempt for American traditions of democracy and liberty, all that altogether shows a president that just does not see himself as president of the whole American people. He's president of a America, of a United States, but not president of the United States. He's not even simply a partisan president, that is par for the course, presidents are partisans, but he is a sectarian president, a president who does not recognize the legitimacy of anyone in the society other than those who support him. And that is remarkable. I really want to make this clear. Americans have actually not experienced anything like this before. People can say that Barack Obama was divisive, but a mainstay of his rhetoric as president was the notion that Americans were one people and that his job was to represent the entire people. This was the subject of his famous convention speech in 2004.
I am my brother's keeper. I am my sister's keeper that makes this country work. It's what allows us to pursue our individual dreams and yet still come together as one American family. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. Now, even as we speak, there are those who are preparing to divide us. The spin masters, the negative ad peddlers, who embrace the politics of anything goes. Well, I say to them tonight, there is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America. There is not a black America and a white America and Latino America and Asian America. There's the United States of America.
It was a major message of his inaugural address in 2009.
On this day, we gather because we have chosen hope over fear, unity of purpose over conflict and discord.
And it was the message of his farewell address in 2017.
Our founders argued, they quarreled, eventually they compromised. They expected us to do the same. But they knew that democracy does require a basic sense of solidarity. The idea that for all our outward differences, we're all in this together, that we rise or fall as one.
But this is almost par for the course for American presidential rhetoric. You can find versions of it going back all the way to the 19th century. In his 1801 inaugural address, Thomas Jefferson told the nation that they were all Republicans and they were all Federalists. This is the Jeffersonian Republicans, not the modern Republican Party. This was after one of the most fiercely contested presidential elections in American history, the election of 1800, which many Americans feared might break out into actual armed conflict. And in an effort to assuage concerns, to bring down the temperature, the victorious Jefferson insisted that all Americans were a part of the same project, that they may not necessarily agree, but they had a common purpose. Abraham Lincoln, who looked to Jefferson as almost a lodestar for his politics, Jefferson and Henry Clay, in his first inaugural, as the secession crisis was rolling through American society, Lincoln famously urged us to embrace the better angels of our nature. He said to Americans that we must be friends and not enemies. He did not want us to be enemies. And 4 years later, after a destructive and catastrophic war, Lincoln ends his second inaugural on a similar note of generosity and a capacious sense of who belonged to the American family. I'll read it for you. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves, and with all nations. This was not a victorious crowing over a defeated enemy. This was a call for unity in the face of destruction. Again, the notion that the American president is president for the entire people, not just his faction and not just his party, has been standard. And so it's genuinely unique and genuinely distinctive that Donald Trump rejects this altogether. He does not see himself as president of the people, or rather, he defines the people in a narrow way. The people are simply those who support him, and anyone else lies outside of that, and they do not belong to the American political community. They do not deserve representation. They and their representatives, to be cheered. They and their representatives deserve to be jeered and insulted and attacked and denigrated. And so I think that when evaluating the State of the Union, it is almost besides the point to talk of policy, although there wasn't much. It's besides the point to talk of him setting a direction for the nation. He didn't really do much of that at all. This State of the Union was nothing more and nothing less than an expression of the fundamental view of the Trump administration, that there are only some Americans who count as truly American, and the rest of us are outsiders, internal aliens who do not deserve the regard of the government under which we live. Trump, again, is not president of the United States, he's president of a United States. And those of us who are outside his sense of national community are simply there to be dominated by him and his allies. I hope you enjoyed this. If you'd like to see more like it, please consider giving me a subscribe and check out this next video.